All right, here we are. We are live. It is Tuesday, and welcome to another True Poker Dealer live stream. If you don't know me, my name is Marc, and I am known on YouTube as True Poker Dealer because I teach people to be poker dealers on YouTube. I also do it at truepokerdealer.com. And I've got some interesting stuff to talk about today. I'm pretty excited about what's going on at Texas Card House today and tomorrow. Now, I do just want to remind everybody, I'm not affiliated with Texas Card House other than the fact that I currently am a dealer there. I'm a dual rate. I don't supervise very often by choice, but I care. I was actually telling somebody yesterday, one of the floors there, like, I've got a lot going on in my life outside of working at Texas Card House. And that's new for me when I'm working in a poker room. Obviously, I've got this, and I've got another project, and a family, and all this stuff. And so, when I start supervising, I start really, really, really caring about the rules and fixing stuff and all that. And Texas Card House is run pretty well, and I don't have any major complaints. And so I can sort of just sit back and enjoy it like that. And if I started supervising there, I would start seeing things that I wanted to fix and start taking extra time and all that stuff. But I do have something I'm really excited about. Now, this is a brand that really cares about the brand at Texas Card House. And, they run these big tournaments. They ran a $500,000 guarantee a couple months ago. Seems like they try to do one thing per month that's pretty on the map. And that's hard to find a room that's really willing to do that to that extent, especially in a market like this. And they got 1.3 million basically for the prize pool a couple months ago. Then they ran a Poker Atlas tournament that the prize pool was up over 680,000. It was a little deceptive because they did this like bag bonus, and it was over $100,000 that went to the bag bonus. But this month, the thing they're doing, which is tonight and tomorrow, is Brad Owen and I think Andrew Neem are coming to the room. I believe tonight the two of them are playing in the 10, 25, 50 no limit live stream. So tonight at I believe it's 6 p.m. Central Time. If you're curious to watch Brad Owen and Andrew Neem play in the Texas Card House live stream, I believe both of them. It might just be Brad. I believe it's both of them. If you're curious to watch them play in one of our 10, 25, 50 live streams with all that action and all that money on the table, tune in because they are scheduled to be there. And then tomorrow, Wednesday, I'm probably going to get a chance to deal to these guys, which I haven't done before. I haven't met them. I don't know them in real life. I don't know that they know who I am, and I'm cool with whatever the reality is there. I am curious to see what they're like in real life. The thing about poker vloggers, it's this really interesting vibe and dynamic because poker vloggers like Brad Owen, they're really good storytellers. They're not necessarily the absolute best at explaining the logic and thinking of poker play. Although a lot of players that hear the beautiful storytelling that they tell end up thinking of them as poker gods. And, there's a truth to that because they're winning poker players in most cases if they're doing this. But it's a really, really cool thing getting to see these guys. Why am I excited about this? I don't generally fan out. I'm not really fanning out, but it's hard for me to find other YouTubers that are on YouTube and are doing it through YouTube, and so I'm really excited about that. Gia G. Lee says hello. Hey, what's going on? Good to see you there. I'm happy to be on the live stream today. It's a pretty exciting day, because like I said, tomorrow I'm probably going to end up dealing to Brad Owen. The way that I think it's going to work at Texas Card House is I think they're going to set up all of these 2-5 games around the room where people are going to come in to play against these guys, and they're going to jump table to table to table is what I hear happens. I don't know for sure. This is going to be tomorrow. Tonight they're on the live stream, so it'll be pretty cool. And yeah, maybe I'll deal to him for a sec. It says, Robert says, did you see Bart Hansen play? See how tight he is. That's how you have to play if you really want to win. He played like 2 hands. So I didn't see when Bart Hansen played. Hold on a second. I just want to make sure I know who you're talking about. He's the Crush Live guy, right? Or am I mixing him up? Yeah. He's also a YouTuber. He's someone I would love to actually see there. I don't know that he was at Dallas. If he was at Dallas, I totally missed him. I really do like his stories. He's a very good storyteller too, but his storytelling is from a professional standard, and he takes someone else's story and turns it into a very listenable, like, talk through the hand. Here's the logic for it. I love doing that. He played like 2 hands. Okay, he played more than 2 hands. But no, I didn't see him play. Do you happen to know if it was Dallas that he did that in? Or maybe it was Austin. I know that he's been to Austin before. And I know that he's also, I think he's done the commentating for it before. He's a really good communicator when it comes to poker. I really enjoy that. Gyro says, yo, to know if you remember me, I asked a question a few weeks ago. I have another, though. What are the pros and cons of being a dealer? Also, have you dealt anything other than poker? Thanks. Robert says, it was TCH, not sure which one. I think it might have been Austin, because I sort of remember seeing that, and I was thinking, I would say hi if he was in the area. Look, I'm all about meeting people that are on YouTube also, right? My little YouTube presence is something that makes me happy nowadays, and learning some tips and tricks, and there's a lot of opportunity anytime there's another YouTuber on. So let's see. To answer your question, thank you for the question, by the way. The pros and cons of being a dealer is an endless list in both directions. I mean, it is what it is. The pros, so I'll do pro, con off the top of my head. So pro, you're making really good money, 25 to 40 plus an hour for a job that you don't have to take home. You show up, you get a lot of breaks. Even though the job is a little intense while you're in the box, there's a lot to do, multitasking, all that stuff. When you learn it can be chill. You get a lot of breaks, but the money's great for the amount of time that you're spending there generally, and you can pay your bills working sometimes 2, 3, or 4 days a week. If you got to work 5 days a week, you got to. I prefer to advise people to stay out of situations where they're stuck having to deal 5 days a week, but that's a good pro. The money is fantastic. A con, you usually have to work weekends and holidays and odd hours, and your social dynamic and social life is a little bit challenging compared to some other regular 9-to-5 jobs. I do know, for example, a bunch of people that I've worked with, there's a lot of people who, because of the profession that they're in, dealing poker, they end up having a tough time seeing their kids every day, and so some of them, they don't see the kids at night, they see them during the day. When they're in school, they end up missing them and seeing them a couple days a week. And there's some jam-ups like that. And holidays, a lot of people are very, very protective about holidays in their life. And, it's something you should know going into it. If you are going to deal poker, you will have to work holidays. It's just that simple. Even somebody that's been there for a long time has a tough time getting holidays off. Why? Because most things aren't open, although nowadays retail's starting to open a bit because they know it's just money to be made. But most things aren't open, and casinos are open, and casinos usually do very well on those days. Let's see, another pro about being a dealer. Let's see, it's you're around a game all day, and you're not doing anything. It matters if you get everybody's money right, but you're not doing anything where there's real, serious consequences on the line, such as a doctor or a lawyer or a engineer. I have an engineering degree. I just didn't want to go down that path personally. At the end of the day, it's just poker, which actually means at the end of the day, it's just people, and you're sort of there doing your best to facilitate a game. And along with that pro of, it's just money, it's always fixable, stuff like that. There's also the truth that you're around an interesting game all the time. So as a dealer, especially if you like poker, you're just around this game that can be really enjoyable, especially if you like it. Another con, I would say, let's see, it's hard to find, TCH is pretty good in Dallas, but it's hard to find really good supervisors in poker. And if you're a dealer, you have to often deal with whatever it is your superiors do or say. Part of the reason for that is supervising poker requires a lot of awareness, a lot of knowledge, and there's not really a uniform training for it still. It's on my list of stuff to get to. I've spent most of my time being a supervisor. And, of my 10 plus years where I worked in poker, it's almost 11 now. About 7 plus of that has been supervising. But yeah, I mean, it is, you're sometimes sort of stuck with whoever the supervisors are. And being a supervisor is really about solving complicated logic problems and using rules as a guideline intelligently. And logic problems can be tough, especially for somebody that's going to have that job. Currently at Texas Card House, I've been dealing for about 3 months. I haven't been a poker dealer since that for 5 years. Before that, I was a poker dealer in 2016 at the Hard Rock in Hollywood, Florida. Before that, I was a floor and a shift manager for years. Before that, I was a dealer. And you asked about if I've dealt anything other than poker. Yes, I actually started in the industry as a table games dealer. I dealt blackjack. I dealt the first games I learned were blackjack, Spanish 21, 3-card poker, and Ultimate Texas Hold'em. I dealt that. Then I went on to learn Pai Gow, roulette, and craps, and poker. And then I went on to actually floor both of those as well. So I have done a lot in the industry. I've sat box before. Although I wouldn't say I was that good at craps, but it was certainly fun getting some time there. It was over the course of about 1.5 years that I was involved with craps too. But yeah, I've dealt other stuff as well. I'll do one more pro and one more con, and then move on. Let's see. So one more pro of being a dealer. There's a lot to learn. Like your first year as a dealer, you're just learning. And I have a couple of stories and comments about some stuff in 2.5 No Limit that came up the other day that I thought would be cool to share so that you guys could gain the experience of this without necessarily having to go through it yourself. And this is the cool stuff. Like, there's just so much to learn as a poker dealer. It's anything but boring until you get to the point where you've experienced a lot of this stuff, and then it's just all about the money. And then some people, if they like poker, they continue to like it. Other people, if maybe they never had an interest in poker and were just there for the money, maybe they like it a little bit less. I always say it's better to do this job if you care and like poker. And then going on to a supervisor, the reason I supervise, by the way, is because there's way more to learn there after you've learned a lot about dealing, right? If you're supervising, there's a bunch of stuff that you have to know. As a dealer, you got to know a lot. And as a supervisor, you have to know everything a dealer knows plus everything a supervisor knows. And it just keeps going from there. And casino industry is like that. There's no matter who, I talked about not having great supervisors sometimes. Well, no matter who it is that you're working with, there's always something to learn from them. So patience and knowledge in that department is always valuable. And one more con about being a dealer that comes to mind. When you're dealing, you are at your table for 30 minutes. If you have to go to the bathroom or something like that, super awkward to ask to take that break. You sort of have to plan your biology around how many tables you're going to be dealing and stuff. So, it's sometimes you get stuck in as many as like 6 tables in a row, and you do 30 minutes each table, and you don't really have an opportunity to use the restroom in between that. For me, it's not a huge deal. I make sure I don't have coffee. I give myself a couple hours before work where I have it if I'm going to have coffee. I don't want to have coffee and then go hit a string because I might have to use the restroom. Like stuff like that does create a little bit of a challenge. But hey, at the same time, your base pay is not paying your bills, it's your tips. So you want as much time on the table as a dealer as possible. But yeah, it can be tough. Like if somebody at a table's got bad breath and you're stuck dealing there, right? And what are you going to do? You get a floor and try to kick them out? I mean, once in a blue moon, you can get that done if it's that outrageous. Nowadays you can still sort of wear masks if you want as a dealer, but that's a new thing. But yeah, you're sort of stuck with if someone's got body odor or something. If it's too offensive, usually the players will complain, you can get rid of them. But being a dealer, you're stuck at that table for those 30 minutes. You have to get along with whoever's there, and that can be a little bit challenging at times. Let me see if I can reduce a little bit of this glare. I'm in a new place right now, by the way. You can sort of see this over here. I should have actually fixed this. Let me bring this in a bit. Get that background better. All right. Yeah, I just moved into a new place and I like it here. Let's see what else. The Video Gamer Consortium says, great money but long and spontaneous hours. Yep. Gyro says, are you a dealer? Oh, he was asking him if he's a dealer. That's funny. How is dealing those table games? As that's what I'd probably start on. I really like dealing table games. So here's the thing. I like dealing, period. And I like mixing it up. Table games is it's a different vibe. You're there playing. The players are playing against the house, which you represent the house, and you have to do everything well because surveillance is watching you because that's how the house makes money when players lose against the house. But you get to root for them. In poker, you can't root for anybody because you're rooting against somebody if you're doing that because they're playing against each other, right? So if I root for the guy in seat 3, the guy that's playing against him in seat 7 is going to be grumble, right? They're going to be a bit pissed. But in table games, you don't care if they win. It's house's money, as long as it's done correctly. So you might as well root for him. So it's like, it's a little bit more like uppity and there's a vibe there. And it's like, it's cool. And I sort of liked... I'm not somebody that really likes to play table games that much. Strike that. I like playing table games. I just don't like the fact that it's a house advantage game. And so it's pretty rare to find me at that table, maybe once or twice a year, for just a couple $100 as me playing table games. But I like playing it. I like dealing it, though, because... like I get to root for people that are good people, and when I deal an awesome hand that someone wins a lot of money, I can be happy for them genuinely. You can't really be happy out loud for anybody as a poker dealer. It's just not the right thing to do because it leaves one person feeling great, the other person feeling bad. But in terms of challenge and difficulty, I find that table games mechanics are a bit more beautiful. I use that word intentionally. It's like learning to deal table games before poker will make your mechanics really on point. Poker's a bit more relaxed. Table games, you have to be really on point with your mechanics because surveillance is watching everything that you do very closely, and you need all the payouts to be correct and everything to be clear for what's happening, and you also want it to be as quick as it can be so that the house can get as many hands out from you. They think of table games dealers, the house, if the house has a personality, thinks of table game dealers as money-making machines for them. Poker dealers sort of as well, right? But table games makes way more money than poker. Generally speaking, in a casino, like 70+% of your revenue comes from slots, 20-something% comes from table games, and the less than 10%, probably close to 5%, comes from poker, if that. So table games is a money maker too. And so they think of you as like getting more hands out gets more money, and the more personable you are, selling yourself to get players to come to an empty table and start playing there. It's just money in the bank for them. And it's just a different vibe. I liked it because it's sort of playing games that I feel like I can't play myself because it's got a house advantage on it. Hopefully that answered you. Let's see. And by the way, when you take those mechanics from table games over to poker, like I said, you sort of look like a superstar. And, there's a handful of people that I've trained and worked with that have done that. And it's always easier to hire somebody that has table games mechanics in poker. It's hard sometimes to go from poker to table games. At the same time, table games dealers do talk too much in poker because they learn that thing that I just talked about as well, where you're rooting for the players and stuff, and that has to be trained out of you. So there are a couple of habits that don't translate to poker exactly, but I mean, it also poker generally pays a little bit better as a dealer as well. Not all the time. Some of the big rooms, some of the big casinos, the table games tip rate is really, really high, but for the most part, poker dealers are gonna beat table games dealers across the board. Robert says, you say fairly often this won't be in an audition. Do you have a video that is this is what will be on an audition? I don't recall seeing it. Let me check my playlist and see what the closest thing to that is. I sort of feel like I covered that at one point, but I can't say with 100% certainty one way or another. So I'm going to check my playlist And let's see. I'm curious now too. I feel like I've sort of talked about this stuff, but the thing that's tough about this is I can only say what'll be in an audition with me. It's impossible for me to say what's definitely going to be in an audition for everyone else. No, I know I did a live stream that covered a lot of that stuff at one point. I can't remember exactly when it was, if I'm being honest, but it's definitely something that would make sense to do. Let me see. If you want to know, yeah, I don't have a list because that would be really hard to make. Like I would put a bunch of stuff on there that most auditions you wouldn't see it because I'd have to be answering for this like universal group of people where everybody has their own pet peeves. Ultimately, testing for pet peeves is what a lot of auditioners do. Video Game Consortium says, I'm an underground dealer, never dealt casino. Love the new background, that's dope. Thank you. It's an interesting point. That does sound pretty fun. Yeah, for sure. Table games is fun. What time and stakes is the Meetup game? What time and stakes is the Meetup game? I don't know what Meetup game you're talking about, Kevin. If you're talking about the live stream that Brad Owen is playing in, that's tonight at Texas Card House. It's 10/25/50. There's probably already a full list for that game because people do regular. This is a regular live stream, so they didn't make this live stream that's the 10/25/50 specifically for Brad Owen and Andrew Neem. They made this live stream for Texas Card House brand, and Brad Owen's going to participate in it. And then tomorrow, oh, you're asking about the meetup. The meetup for him tomorrow. So Wednesday, I think he calls it a meetup game. Let me just look it up right now so I can get this info correct. My understanding is he's going to be bouncing around table to table though. But let's see, where's Dallas? June. So we do have high hands. I made a mistake last week, by the way. Someone asked me about the high hands. I hadn't actually been to work in the month of June, and I hadn't received that info in the pre-shift, but we do actually have high hands. It's Sunday through Thursday, 100 every hour at Texas Card House. I think it's 5 p.m. to like 4 a.m. or something. Let's see. So it just says June 8th, Dallas, Texas meetup game. It doesn't say exactly what time. I'm not sure, and they might do it that way to sort of give them a chance to recover from the night before without committing them too early. But while we're doing this right now, I will send the shift manager there a text asking that question, and hopefully he'll get back to me. What time is tomorrow's meetup game with Brad and Andrew? I'm live on YouTube and I was asked that question. There we go. Someone once told me they hate when people slowly read out loud what they're typing. It's a pet peeve of theirs. If you're like that, my apologies to you. I'm not like that. The stakes I've been told is a 2-5 though. My understanding is it's going to be 2-5 no limit, which at Texas Card House is a $1,000 max when the game starts, and then it's match the stack after that. And so the games get pretty deep there, but I imagine that tomorrow the 2-5 games will be a little bit thin. I do want to say this. Look, I've worked at Texas Card House for a few months now. We fill the room up pretty quick. So, come a little bit early and make sure that you get yourself a seat if you want. If you want to try to play with Brad. I don't know how they're going to manage it, but typically from what I've heard about when Brad and Andrew come to town, they will leave a seat for them and, move them around the room. Robert says, if you deal for someone like Kerry Packard and he wins, you get tipped the house. That sounds good. I don't know who Kerry Packard is, but I should probably figure that out, huh? So, all right. So now is an opportunity for me to tell a couple of stories. So I want to tell a story yesterday, or it might not have been yesterday, but it was recently. I was following a dealer, and I saw the following. And this is a story for anyone that wants to know what it's like to be a dealer, where players take shots at the game, at the dealer, trying to do things that they don't get caught, that are not within integrity, that give them an advantage. And this is something that as a poker dealer, you sort of need to be aware of. Now, as a table games dealer, you really need to be aware of this. But as a poker dealer, it's also important. So here's what happened. I was tapping into a table, and for those that don't know, when it's your turn to go to a table, you let the dealer know that you're there and you're going to be coming in the next hand, and they finish up the hand that they're on. So I got there toward the beginning of this hand, and the dealer in this case was engaged in conversation with a player on the right side of the table. All right. I believe the action had gone a bunch of limpers for $5, and then maybe the big blind or something raised to 40 in a 2-5 game. And there were a couple of callers, and the dealer was engaged in some conversation. And I'm not trying to say that the dealer shouldn't have been, although generally you want to reduce conversation as a general guideline. I'm just, there's different types of conversation. So I don't know exactly what this conversation was, whether the dealer initiated it or a player was asking questions in the middle of the hand, which happens, right? Either way, I've been around a bit, and I noticed a look. It was time to bring the flop, and everybody had apparently called. And I noticed a look that one of the players gave to the dealer and to a player. And that look sort of alerted me that maybe something wasn't right in the pot. And so the dealer brings the bets in, and then goes and brings the flop. And the flop, as the flop comes out, I was trying to think of what it could have been that look meant. And so I counted the pot and the number of players. There were 5 players in the pot, and there was only 4 players worth of called money in there. So what had apparently happened is a player had managed to make it to the flop without calling 35 of the $40. They'd only put their $5 in. And I suspected I knew which player it was based on the other player who looked at the dealer and that player but didn't speak up. But by the time I had been able to, because I couldn't go in and actually count the pot, and it's really tricky to stop a game on a suspicion of something being off just because I saw a player give that look. But after I sort of counted it, this player had already folded by that point. I just decided to let it go because I wasn't certain about who it was, and the 2 people that were possibly the ones had folded. I was pretty sure I knew which player it was. So my point is, this player definitely did not call this bet. One of the 2 players, and when I fast forward, you guys will realize that I did know who it was. The player did not call 35 of the $40. Now, in my opinion, there's no way that a player does that without realizing, oh, I'm in the flop and I never put that money in. It would be almost impossible for them not to realize it. So that, to me, is a player that is clearly taking a shot at the game and at the dealer. And as long as nobody speaks up, they make it to the flop without calling the pre-flop bet. So then I sit down at the table, and it's this particular player's small blind. And I'm not really thinking of anything of it when I start pitching the cards out. Now, I teach, just get the cards out in cash games and then tell the players to get the blinds out. The second orbit, you start saying blinds, guys, and then the action starts where it's supposed to. And, if you need to keep saying it, you keep saying it. Well, I had to tell this player 3 times to get the small blind out. And the action got to him, and he still didn't have his small blind out. And then I told him again, probably the 4th time at this point, I need your small blind in there. He puts a small blind in there. I don't remember what his action was. He did that again later, not putting his small blind in. And again, I didn't really think anything of it. But then about halfway through my down, there was a $20 pre-flop raise, and he only put $15 in. Now, could have been a coincidence, right? Why am I talking about this? Because now I'm starting to develop this suspicion with this particular player. My suspicion with this player is he's taking shots for $5 at a time at the dealer because some of them let him get away with it. not putting the full amount in. As a dealer, you really need to make sure that every bet is correct. And then the next time he did it, I was certain that this guy does this, okay? Because the next time that he did it, it was also a $20 raise pre-flop in a 2-5 game. And this time, he took 5 white chips very deliberately when I wasn't facing him, but I was paying attention to him at this point, sort of peripherally. He took 5 white chips. He took 2 red chips underneath them, and he tossed it in a way where it was sort of concealed the red chips, and the white chips were splashed on top of it. And I had to ask him for the extra $5 again. And so at this point, I was pretty convinced that this player was taking shots. And as I thought back on it, I thought he probably gets away with not paying a small blind sometimes as well, which is why he's so slow to do that. Either way, that's 5 things within about a 30-minute period that I noticed with this particular player. So the question is, how do you handle it? Well, when you get up from the table, you go and you talk to a supervisor. Even if you're pushing another table, you just tell them real quick. Five instances that seem like this guy takes shots at the dealers here. It's hard to tell what he gets away with, but nothing was ever over, that's for sure. And so I wanted you guys to know about that. Now, I think it's outside of etiquette to really call the player out on that. I think that notifying a supervisor is the right way to handle that. That being said, him not putting the money in on the flop bet, if I had known for sure that he didn't do it, then that would have had to have been a floor call, even though it's not my game, right? But I didn't want to stop the game for something that I wasn't sure about. But yeah, this guy constantly angles, and you got to tell your floor about this, because it's not going to stop unless somebody either calls him out on it or kicks him out or tells him, we're watching you now. We've noticed that you've done this 5 times. We're not questioning your integrity, but you either need to start paying more attention or play somewhere else type of thing. But you let the supervisors handle that. So I just wanted you guys to see that perspective and understand that there are absolutely poker players out there that take advantage like that. And you, the dealer, the supervisors aren't going to know about it unless you tell them. And that's sort of my point. So I just wanted you to know. And it's also really easy, by the way. It's really, really easy to create a problem when you communicate it if you call the player out on it. Because if you call the player out on it and he starts defending himself in a way that makes you look bad, you're creating a very challenging circumstance for yourself. You really have to give your supervisor a chance to go in there armed with having looked at some footage so that he can say or she can say exactly what happened in defense of, like, you don't want your supervisor to go there saying, hey, this guy might be doing it, and try to pull him off the table. But if they go watch the footage and they see exactly what you're talking about, okay, now they can really fix this problem. Also, don't expect them to go watch the footage. That's just what I would do as a supervisor. I'm not saying that's what everybody would do. Robert says he's actually talking about Kerry Packard. He's actually passed away now. Australian billionaire who is famous for tipping well, but there are others. Gotcha. Greg said, I would like to think I'm pretty conscientious about my blinds. That's awesome. Let's see. Big Swag says, constantly angling players are some of the worst. Takes up so much focus and brain power. Absolutely agree with that. It's very challenging sometimes being there at the table and just, you know somebody's going to be doing it, and you sometimes don't feel like you're armed properly with getting them to stop. Now, I will say this. You don't want to imply that a player has no integrity. You would go to the supervisor with that. But, if you keep dealing to this player and nobody's taking care of it, after a while you can say, please pay more attention. This is the second time that you've put the wrong amount in. Something like that. You're not going to go over favorably with that comment, and so just be prepared for them to get upset or maybe tip you less or something like that. But by calling attention to the table for the player putting the wrong amount in, you will get other players to start speaking up against that player because they're not in integrity. So you got to be careful about it. The phrasing I just used isn't great. Like, maybe you give them a hard time about it instead. And by that I mean I use the phrase give them shit sometimes. It would be something like, 1, 2, 3, 4 red chips. You got this, man. You can do it. I know you can do it. 4 red chips, something like that, where you're giving them a hard time, something like that. But yeah, so I wanted to sort of tell that story. It's just 4 of these. It's not that hard, right? 1, 2, 3, 4. You can do it. Let's see. So the other thing I wanted to talk about, which I teased in the I got the answer, by the way. The answer to the Meetup game. So we got asked the question. I see a text message is what I should say. So tomorrow the Meetup game starts at 6 p.m., which is interesting. Might be hard to get a seat at that point. I wonder, because it's usually pretty packed at that point anyway. But I would say come a little earlier than that is really what I'm thinking. Plan on spending some time, and then you can make the vlog, right? Making the vlog is a pretty awesome thing. I'm not going to lie. I would love to make the vlog in a hand, but it's tough because everybody wants to make the vlog where they win, and not everybody does win against these guys because they're still solid poker players. Should be interesting. Let's see. Oh yeah, so the other thing I was going to talk about, it came up yesterday at Texas Card House about a very simple little rule, but it just goes to show that tournament in poker is pretty universal and cash rules are not as universal. And it takes a lot to get really, really good cash rules. And so, this was one of the first times that I spoke up at Texas Card House. I'm not saying that if they choose to do it the way that I don't consider to be industry standard, there's a problem. But basically, I just wanted to speak up because I had a opinion I felt strongly about. So in a 2-5 no limit Texas Hold'em game, the question that was brought up was whether or not, when you have an extra red chip, whether or not you break that red chip down into dollar chips when you're chopping a pot. All right, so 2 people show ace jack for a straight, and you have to stack up the pot, chop the pot. The question is, do you chop it down to the nearest 5? Like if there's $7 left over, do you give the player that's next to receive the button the $5 chip and the other player the extra 2? Or do you take the $5 chip and break it down into ones and then go 4 to one and 3 to the other? And I want to talk about this so that I can get you guys thinking about, how to think about setting up your rules for your room for these types of things. The first thing I'll say is when it comes to something like this, particular rule, it doesn't matter that much, right? It doesn't matter that much which way you go. But at the same time, if I'm running a room, I like to do the thing that's going to follow the industry standard as much as possible and get more hands out and keep everybody happy. And so I'm going to, I bring this up without giving my answer yet because I figured that people will start commenting with what's done in their room so we can get a little bit of perspective here for this. I have one way to do this detail. It is a detail, it's nothing more than a detail, but I have one way to do this detail that I consider to be more professional. But let's see. Greg says I had that exact situation, a player, except we both had King 10 offsuit for a straight. Got it. That's funny. And Greg says, I wish I could play at that Meetup game. I'm too far away, unfortunately. So Lil Venice says, I would guess give extra 5 to the player in worst position. Robert says, I've usually seen it broken down. At least I think so. And this is a detail, right? Because in 2-5, you don't chop that much. Now, also keep in mind, Texas Card House is a room that spreads a lot of 1-2-5, meaning $1, $2 blinds, and it's a $5 limp amount in the pot limit games. So PLO, it's 1-2-5. Dealer choice is 1-2-5, where there are a lot of different games you can play. And then, the Big O 8 or better, where everybody gets 5-card Omaha, basically high-low. That's also 1-2-5 a lot of the time. And so, the question is, what do you do? So Here's my answer. My answer is the industry standard that I personally have seen and the logic that I've seen. This was, for me, this was maybe 8 years ago, 9 years ago, 10 years ago, something like that. I was working at a poker room called Calder Casino and Racecourse in Miami Gardens, Florida, and we had to come up with our policy for this. And the thing that we did was we sort of consulted our experienced employees who just very sort of nonchalantly said, no, you don't break down $5 chips in this game. And myself and a couple others who were inexperienced at the time, this was actually probably 2009 even, so it was longer than that ago, 2010. We very adamantly said, no, it should be done, we chop it evenly, you use the small blind is $2 and it should be chopped evenly. And we were overruled, and we were told that the professional standard is you don't worry about breaking down a red chip in a big blind of 5, in a game with a big blind of 5, even though there's a $2 small blind. And so at that point, I sort of started to pay attention to what's done and get used to it a bit. Now, I'm told that the Northeast is full of rooms that break it down to the dollar every single time, which is interesting. It's sort of a new market out there in Maryland and some other places. And I understand the logic there, but I will say this to you. I've already gone through this conversation at Calder, and my personal experience is there's no need to take the time to break down a $5 chip into $1 chips and then split them up in these games. It slows the game down, and none of the 2-5 players cared. If the 2-5 no limit players cared, then the loose change would play. And if you don't know what that means is every single time somebody goes all in, they're only entitled to win dollar amounts in increments of 5. So if somebody at the table that's against them goes all in for less and has $1, $2, $3, or $4 left over, the player who went all in for more doesn't get that money. Why? Because we don't care about those tiny dollar amounts in a game where the big blind is $5. It's less than one big blind. So for that reason and many other reasons, whenever the big blind is $5 or more, or actually whatever the big blind is, my personal experience and opinion is there's no need to break down that chip. It just takes up time and nobody cares. And, thinking about it also, if the players don't care about the loose change playing, they're not going to care about this extra buck here or there, and it all evens itself out in the long run because it goes to worse position. That being said, there is an expectation in some regions for players in a 2-5 game to break it down, and they sort of expect to get the extra dollars. And then, if that's the case, then that's the case. But to me, it slows everything down. There's no reason to do it. And that's my 2 cents. So one day when I eventually come up with a rule set that's universal for cash, that will be a part of that rule set. Because I've dealt and supervised a lot of games where that $5 chip does not get broken down, and nobody's ever had a problem with it in my experience in markets that are used to it. When you try to change it to that, sometimes they have an issue for a little bit, and then you just tell them, what do you care for? You're at this table, which is 2-5. You don't care when someone goes all in and there's $3 left over. Like, why do you care here? And it works itself out in the long run, basically. And it's just a way to speed things up. Just a little rule example, but this stuff is tough because, So the question is, if you're opening a new room, how do you determine what rule to go with? And so I actually want to give you guys my real opinion on this, because I've seen a lot of different things done. I've seen consensus done. I've seen debates between supervisors and shift managers. I've seen the room director just make a final decision and say that's it. The thing that I would personally do is I would literally call up the supervisors at a handful of the rooms that I respect the most, both in my area and outside. Like, I would be calling Aria, I'd be calling the Venetian, I'd be calling, me personally, I'd be calling like the Hard Rocks in Florida, I'd be calling Foxwoods, these are rooms, Maryland Live, MGM. Some of these are the rooms of Borgata, or the rooms that I consider to be the most respected. Why would I be calling these rooms to get that perspective? Some rooms in California too. I'm not trying to leave any out. My point is, I'd be calling these rooms and asking what they do at their poker tables, because these are the rooms that have been around the longest, that have put a lot of thought into these little details. And if you start seeing a trend with these different rooms, it makes it pretty easy to know, hey, if we want to be as professional as possible, this is what we need to do. It would be nice if there was a way to universalize everything. It just doesn't exist yet. They've done it for tournaments with the TDA. But there is a curveball in this one rule, which is sort of funny. Let's see. The Video Game Consortium says my favorite. Greg says Mohegan Sun, Connecticut breaks it down to the dollar in 1-2 and possibly in 2-5. Yeah, it's hard to know unless you've actually been there and seen it and had it register. Robert, LOL, I think loose change does play in Mississippi, where I play most. So, I'm not trying to take shots at different places, but a lot of the time, the way that these rules are, instead of calling around and finding out what these details are in different respectable poker rooms that have put a lot of that thought in, a lot of rooms just use their own logic, or they get their consensus. And logic, at first, if you don't understand that it does slow the game down in 2-5, and the players don't care if you just don't break it down. Logic says you should. Why? Because it feels fair. And so there are some booby traps in poker rules that way that get created. Logic says in 2-5 no limit that the loose change should play. Why? Because they went all in. They're trying to go all in, right? Until you realize that nobody cares. Until you realize that, if you get a 4-way all in a 2-5 game where everybody's playing basically just red chips and no $1 chips for any of the bets, you really don't want to be creating side pots with $1, $2, $3, $4 increments. $5 increments is all you need to do. Makes things a lot easier. So it's just there's a lot of thought that's gone into poker room rules, and that's why, in my opinion, calling up prominent cash rooms to get their little details is really valuable. I do wish it was easier to do than the call and wait and all that stuff, but why not, right? Why not figure out what the industry is really doing and try to be consistent with that? Let's see. Hey, Marc, hope you're doing well. I am doing well. Thank you. Robert says, logically, if she weighs the same as a duck. Okay, I have to look up what the rest of that is. Let's see. Logically, if she weighs the same as a duck. Got it. I don't need to say the rest of that. It's mildly offensive. But obviously I did laugh a little bit. So let's see. Yeah, and I've seen a lot of times, and like I said, when I first entered the industry as a supervisor, I was like adamantly saying it's fair to chop it up, it's fair to chop it up. It shouldn't go red chip to one and $2 to the other if you have $7 left over. Which, by the way, most of the time it's going to be $7. I've heard the argument, well, if they want to chop if they want to have the red chips go, just play 5-5. It's like, well, you're not going to play 5-5 just for that one reason, right? Having the small blind and the big blind be different amounts does create a different dynamic in the game that I think is valuable. Robert says, Monty Python quote, oh, got it. I like it. She's a witch. Turn me into a newt. Nice. Yeah, I probably have seen clips of that, but I haven't actually seen that movie. It's always interesting receiving references. I like receiving references on here because I might seem unaware and stupid here, but the next time it comes up, I know, right? I could be like, oh, Monty Python, right? And then they would think that I've seen it and I'm awesome. And then I would eventually have to admit that that's not the case, that I haven't seen it and I'm not awesome. Bordering on obscure reference at this point. No problem, though. Somebody got it. There's a lot of rules that are like that. Oh, so the one thing I wanted to say that was really interesting, Texas Card House, which I don't know which way they're going to go on this particular rule, but I'm going to guess that they're probably going to end up chopping up the $5 chips into $1 chips. And the reason being, they follow WSOP rules. And it's something that was brought into Texas Card House before, Dallas was even open years ago. They said that we follow WSOP standards. Okay, fine. I get it. When it comes to cash, to me, that's a little bit like finding a really good pizza place and opening a deli and asking them how to run a deli. Like, WSOP is all about tournament, right? They're not known for cash games. And so it actually, but it literally says in the WSOP rules to chop it up if the dollar chips are a part of the game, and it uses 2.5 as the example. So if you're following WSOP standards, then you will be chopping down to the nearest dollar in that, because the $2 in the small blind use $1 chips. But I still stand by that being a inferior way to do things in the grand scheme of things. And perhaps I'm just venting a little bit here, but also I want you guys to understand how much thought has to go into these types of details when you're trying to come up with a room. Like, can you imagine trying to open a poker room? And I'm working with different people in different places that do this stuff as a consultant, and the types of conversations they have to have. This conversation could take them 20, 30, 40 minutes. They might have to revisit it later. It's a lot of time and energy in order to open a room and come up with all the rules that you want and everything like that. Robert says, so, been playing with mixed nuts. I can get through 10 out of 10 Omaha 8 or better about half the time now, and 9 out of 10 the other half. Still not good enough? Honestly, that's pretty good. I don't know how much time you're taking, so time is a factor. But, and I should mention, so first of all, what is mixed nuts? I introduced it in the last live stream. And provided a couple of links. And now that you're mentioning it, I believe that the iOS version is available now. Yeah, I got an email today saying that the iOS version is available, so I'm going to link it right here. Let's see. Here's the iOS version, and here is the... So what is Mixed Nuts? It is a completely free training tool for hand reading created by Riffraff Games, who is somebody who I met through Truepokerdealer. He's a dealer in the United States. He deals poker. He built this tool. He's also a former video game programmer for years. And he made this tool just because he wanted to create something helpful. And so now I feel like I want to actually download it while we're talking and take a look at it. But to answer your question, look, you want to be able to get it 100% of the time. However, this particular tool is great for training because it's harder to get it right on here than it is on a table. On a table, you're not looking at 5 hands every single time, and the players are sometimes pushing the winning cards aside. The players are there to protect their own interests. They're not going to let you muck their hand almost ever. But let me go to the App Store and download this thing. It's called Mixed Nuts. It is a poker hand reading training tool. And maybe I'll be the first one to download the iOS version. So I'm installing it now. I hope I remember my password. I'm usually good about this stuff, but I change it so frequently. Yep, I got it right. So it's downloading now, and we'll see it in a second. Greg says, suppose I'm playing and someone is being offensive to someone else for one reason or another, for example, use of racial slur, profanity, etc. How as a player should I handle that? So I really appreciate that question. The poker industry really appreciates that question. The first thing I'll say is if you happened to watch the 2019 TDA Summit when they talked about, there were a bunch of women in day 2 that came forward. It was about 35 minutes worth of women talking about how poker rooms are just such a terrible environment for women to spend their time. And this is what it looks like on the phone, by the way. Let me see if I can get the glare off of there. Oh, come on. The camera's not picking it up. I want to just tap it, but it's not going to work. All right, whatever. My last live stream shows Mixed Nuts. It's an amazing training tool, but I do want to answer this question. So basically, the women at the table were complaining about the culture from poker players where people just zip their mouth for just about everything at the poker table. Somebody's being treated rudely, they keep quiet. It's almost like this not my problem mentality, because the backlash of speaking up is often confrontational, directed toward the person who speaks up. Like, what do you care? You're not even a part of it. Or if someone's ignorant and doesn't understand that they're doing something wrong to begin with, like if someone's willing to use racial slurs, they might not realize that that's a problem, as ridiculous as that is, but it happens. People are people. We all have blind spots, in our lives in terms of social dynamic and how we affect other people and all those things. Everybody has that. And so, your question of how should I handle this is, I can say what I do. When somebody's out of line like that, the thing that I personally do is I sort of slide out of the table, whether it's that moment or a moment slightly after that where nobody notices. I slid away and I'll go tell a supervisor that they might want to have a quick conversation with the dealer about what happened at the table when the dealer goes to push. I don't want the player to realize that I'm involved in that way. However, I am willing to own up to the fact that I went and talked to a supervisor about something like that. And I will personally, which I don't play a ton of poker, so I haven't had this exact scenario come up, but I will personally say to a supervisor in this case, like, I'm comfortable being a part of this conversation if it helps you. I'd prefer to stay out of it, but I'm comfortable being a part of the situation if it helps you. But it's tough to say what makes sense for you, because I also know how to compose myself in that moment where I'm not going to say something out of line. I'm not just a poker player at the table. I'm also somebody that's been in a supervisor role and a shift manager role for a long time in casinos. And so if somebody is offensive or out of line in some way, the typical way that the types of people at poker tables handle this stuff is to, give someone a hard time or tell them to stop. And it's like, you're going to get kicked out if you draw that type of attention to yourself. And that's why I would say slide away from the table a hand or two later, or right then and there if you think you feel like it. Slide over to a supervisor, give them a conversation, tell them what happened. If you're in a small poker room where that's going on, can be a little tougher to be discreet about it. Like maybe walk by a supervisor and ask them, hey, I'm going to go to the restroom right now. When I come back, can you meet me over there where we're sort of out of line of sight and I got something I got to tell you that happened there. I would say be smart about it. The thing is, I think it's so common to let something like that go and not get involved, and it really does hurt the overall vibe for poker. But even the thing that I'm saying right now, I don't think enough people are going to do it, if I'm being honest, to chill it out. Now, if it's profanity, profanity is a little bit easier in the moment. If I feel like the dealer probably should speak up, it depends on the room too. There's certain rooms where more profanity is sort of acceptable. It's sort of a part of the culture in some places, even in the U.S. In the Northeast, where I know that you play, profanity is a little bit less tolerated in public settings. And so if a player is cursing, it's going to be like, whoa, a little bit more shock value. And you get tourists and stuff, even in a place like Foxwoods and Mohegan Sun, where people are going to bring their own personal vibe from wherever they're from, not realizing that people are different in a different place. I happen to be from the Northeast, so I know what it's like up there. But profanity is something where you could say, hey, we don't talk like that in Massachusetts if it's Massachusetts, in Connecticut if it's Connecticut, or a lot of people, when there's a woman at the table, they'll say, hey, there's a woman at the table. I personally hate that. It creates this weird male-female dynamic where the woman almost feels like this would be done if they weren't there, and everybody's adjusting their behavior just because they're at the table, and it's involving them in it too. And then they have to almost pick a side at that point. I don't really like doing that. I would just say geography based, we don't really do this out here in blank, wherever you are. As a dealer, there have been a few times at Texas Card House where, like, I'll start. If someone gets obsessed. Now, I want to say this: if you're dealing and one person curses at another person, not okay. That needs to be stopped. Call the floor. Okay, no exception to that. If someone says "fuck you," if somebody says, you're a piece of shit, something like that. I'm using the language right now in order to demonstrate it. If somebody says something like those things, floor immediately. Like, you get a floor over to the table, okay? But if someone's using the F word casually over and over again, like it's done in poker a lot of the time, if you feel like it's crossed the line, and this is a judgment call, or maybe your room says it's not allowed at all, but if you feel like it's crossed the line, I like to do something like language. Come on, like just the chill, like, hey, think about where you are, buddy. I find people respond well to that, is the point. Now, if they fire back at you, if you're in a place like Florida and they fire back at you and start saying like, well, we're not at church, blah, 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 you can sort of like back off and say, oh, I was just singing a song. What, did you think I was trying to tell you not to do that? I was just singing a song. And then maybe you sing the song again if they keep doing it, right? And then, if they don't get the hint and you can't sort of fix that vibe, it's really tough if they're not cursing at anybody to get a floor over there, because the player is going to just like blow up at that. That might be another one where you just tell a supervisor to go, tell a supervisor it might make, like, consider standing over there, like using the word consider instead of telling them what to do. You don't want to tell a supervisor what to do, but alert them to the fact that the players at the table might be making the other players a little uncomfortable, and it definitely felt like too much. Let's see. Video Gamer Consortium said, I made sure to not be a part of that culture when I was coming up in poker. It may be underground, but see something, say something always goes. Yeah, unfortunately, it's a little bit on the more rare side for that, but that's really good. And being authentic in those moments goes a long way too. So if you do decide that you want to, like, if someone makes an actual racist comment, it's totally acceptable for a player to say that's not okay. It's just a true statement. It's a fact. It's a true statement. Like, it's not okay. It's gonna be hard for the person to defend themselves. But it's not a good. I mean, the dealer should be calling the floor, honestly, if that's happening. That's one thing about this whole conversation. It's a little weird to hear. I haven't heard a racist comment at my table personally. I can't remember a time I've ever been a dealer and heard a racist comment like that. But I mean, it's an auto floor call if I'm a dealer. You were asking about being a player at that table. Let's see. Killer kill, but using ones instead of eyes, says, yeah, never put a non-positive focus on a player. Well said. Disarm the situation. Appreciate that. Greg says, hey buddy, let's chill. Yeah, something like that. Let's say I wouldn't use communication that implies that the person's behavior has to change. I would, if you're going to say something about, well, I guess I don't know if you're talking about cursing or not. Let's see. There's all these different ways to say, like, honestly, there's so many different variables in a situation like this. It's really case by case. I've seen a player before, when someone else was cursing, tell them, hey, this isn't a rap video, cut it out, right? But they were doing it to try to tilt the player to get their money. They weren't doing it to support anything, right? So, I mean, if you want to try to tilt a player while you're playing poker, not dealing poker, I'm talking from the playing standpoint for a second. If you're a poker player and somebody does something that's not okay, like too much F words, you can absolutely go after them to try to tilt them and say, like, hey, this isn't a rap video, or something crazy like that. And then they start getting fired up at you, but you sort of got to expect it's coming. Hey, buddy, let's chill. Yeah, something like that. I don't know. You sent me that message on Facebook the other day. I've seen you, Greg. You don't seem like the type that would carry that vibe so well. Because that's a bit like in your face, even though you're imagining yourself saying it casually. By the way, I liked that you sent me that that Facebook message about Rampage. I have to enter that Facebook group in order to see the situation you're talking about. I was hoping I would get into that group in time to be able to bring it in the live stream, but I couldn't. But yeah, let me see. I've been in a situation in a tournament where another player cussed me out just for sucking out on him. Luckily, he busted out soon thereafter. If it's coming directly at you, you do have the right at any moment to tell the dealer, please call the floor. You know, it's going to upset the player, but who cares, you know? Like, you got to understand that if you add to the confrontation by crossing any lines at all, even if you're in the right, even if you're just trying to help, you're possibly going to get kicked out too. It's one of the tough dynamics about being a player in these situations. And this is why sometimes people don't speak up. Because if you speak up and you step wrong, all of a sudden you're also a guilty party. It's challenging. This is why I say exit and then tell somebody. And then some people think of that as like tattletaling. It's not exactly tattletaling. It's sort of avoiding confrontation. That's why I say, like, I'm available if you want to even say that I called you over. Like, something like that. It doesn't bother me. It's like, yeah, I just felt like it had to be done. You know, simple statement. Cursing too much. That's just too much, man. Someone says a comment that's actually offensive to a gender or a race. That's not okay. You know, something like that. Just say it like it is and leave it alone. What kind of firing back since it's Florida? Florida, there's this vibe where like all the players will gang up on the dealer for enforcing a rule or like stopping these types of things because they want what they want, right? They want to be able to do whatever they want. And it can be tough to be the dealer in the situation where the entire table's against you. In most other places, if somebody's out of line, the entire table will support the dealer enforcing the policy, whatever it is. Let's see. Sean says, as a player, always love hopping in the streams and listening for a while. Helps be a better player. Thanks for all the content, Marc. Appreciate that comment very much. Thank you. Happy to have you here, Sean. Greg says, let me see. No, it's not. You're standing up for someone or yourself, and rightly so. I forget exactly what the context was of that, but I don't know how to respond because I don't remember the proper context for that comment. But at the time, I'm sure it made sense. Also, knowing Greg, there's a reasonable chance that he's going to jump in and help me understand what he was saying. But these are really good questions and conversations. Greg was saying, you were saying that it's kind of like tattling. Well, the tattling that I was referring to. So why am I saying this? Because I've had players start attacking somebody else. Like I've had one player who was in the wrong attack the player who was supporting the room when they got up from the table and then talked to a supervisor about it, and then the supervisor came over and started addressing the table. See, the thing that happens sometimes, and this can be absolutely brutal, and this is part of the reason also why there's this culture where people don't always speak up. If you go and you tell a supervisor about this, you're literally putting your trust in the supervisor to handle it professionally. But what happens if they come over and they do one of these, which you see sometimes? They come over to the table and they're like, okay, guys, we hear that there's a lot of cursing at this table and we need it to stop. And then they just walk away. Well, all of a sudden, the whole table is just like, oh God, this guy just made it worse because they're not here anymore. Now they're just pissing off the player that's done it. The player knows that someone went and talked about it. It's not a good way to handle it as a supervisor, but there's also not any good training for that type of situation. Like if someone comes and tells me that, I'm gonna ask them, okay, who's doing it? Thank you for coming and talking to me about it. I personally am gonna go over to the table and listen. Okay. If it's done and it's not happening anymore after 10-15 minutes, I might just come back a little bit later and listen again. If it is going on a bunch, while it's happening, I'm going to say it's too much cursing. you know, because then you're completely taking the focus off of the person that brought it to your attention. You're just a supervisor standing there and you happen to hear all this stuff, right? But this stuff isn't really taught, you know. And so this is why I say just about everything as being a supervisor is solving a sometimes complicated logic problem. And boy, coming over and just doing the whole, there's cursing at this table, it needs to stop, is so brutal. If you're the dealer at that table, you're just like, you know. So that's why I say it comes across as tattling depending on, I should have said depending on how a supervisor comes and handles it after that fact. But, you know, at the same time, these are really interesting conversations, like I said. So let's see. What I want to do now is we're going to jump back into, we're going to do one more challenge for the mixed nuts game. And let me see. Nope, not that one. I have to figure out where this is. Here it is. Okay. And I have to get this here. All right. Like that. And we'll move it over. And we'll move it up. All right. So we're gonna do a mixed nuts challenge right now for a moment. This is a free hand reading training tool created by Riff Raff Games, who is a poker dealer in the U.S. who has a passion for helping people, and he's also a video game programmer extraordinaire. He has programmed some pretty popular games, actually, and you know, I don't think he's watching right now, but maybe he can tell you about it. But we're gonna do our challenge here right now while we have a moment. And let's see, I gotta pull this over here and get this over here. All right. Oh no, it did the thing where it resized it. I didn't want that to happen. All right, it should be back to normal. Yep. So let's see. All right, there's a couple more questions there. I'm gonna do one round of Omaha 8 to start, and then I'll jump back to the questions. So we're gonna do 10 hands. We wanna see how quickly we can do this. Please play along with me and see if you get these right. And this is just a hand reading tool that's totally free. You can get this on your phone, Android and iOS. iOS is brand new for today. So I forgot to look. This is high-low. All right. So I can see there's no low. I can see that the board's paired. So the first thing I'm looking for is pocket queens, jacks, sixes. I see jacks here. I don't see pocket queens or fives. I see a five, but that's not good. So that's the high. There's no low. Next. All right. Next one. Here I'm looking at the board. There is no board pair. So King 10 is going to be the best. I don't see King 10, but I see the 10 here with the 10-8, and there's no low. So we go in the next one. Let's see. There is no flush. The best possible straight is going to be a 5-7. I don't see a 5-7. Am I right about that? Yeah, I am right about that. 5-7. I see a 5. No 5 deuce. So the next best straight is going to be a, well, that's it. It's either a 5-7 or a 5 deuce. And so now we're looking for sets. I see 3 6s. Do we have anything better than 3 6s? No. Here we go. Oh, I forgot about the low. There's a low. All right, we messed up. No problem, though. It showed us the low there. I should have gone back and done that. I sort of want to start over. I am going to start over. So I'm going to restart this, and let's see. I'm going to answer these questions, and then I'll get back to it. Robert says, you know, I was in the military. You get promoted to corporal at 6 weeks of leadership school before you can have one private under you. In the civilian world, there is nothing. Yep, it's true. Joe said, should the dealer ever address a profanity problem, or should he always call a floor supervisor? Generally, the dealer can address it. You know, I was sort of saying that it depends on what the culture of the room is like and what's expected of the dealers. If all the dealers are sort of letting a lot of that stuff go, then you lean a little bit more toward letting stuff go. However, there should never be a room that, and I stand by this. I don't care what's done out there. I literally stand by this. There should be no rooms in the entire world of poker where someone can curse at another player and nobody says anything. A dealer should be calling a floor if someone is cursing directly at another player, meaning F you, you're a piece of shit, calling somebody the C word. I've seen that at the table. Like, that has to be a floor call every single time. That said, if someone is cursing too much, it's a judgment call depending on the culture of the room. And yes, the dealer should be speaking up if it crosses whatever the room's line is. And this can be a little bit tricky because, if you go and you ask a supervisor, what's our line, they're going to give you the, like, kill an ant with a sledgehammer thing a lot of the time. Because it's tough for them to ever say, as a supervisor talking to a dealer, it's tough for them to ever say, yeah, just let some of it go, right? Because then all of a sudden, well, they gave them permission to let it go. And it gets interpreted weirdly and stuff like that. But let's see. I think it's a bit much if someone's just, like, casually cursing. I think it's a bit much for a dealer without warning or talking to anybody about it at the table, talking to the players, telling the players we don't allow that. Like, it's simple to say we don't allow this much cursing. And then they might say, well, the last dealer didn't say anything about it. We're talking like this. And then you can say something like, well, unfortunately, the last dealer wasn't doing what they're supposed to do. And here we are. I'm not trying to kill your fun, but it's just too much. Something like that's fine. It's easy to be in the moment with this stuff, too. It's sort of hard to recreate it when there's not a player there and all this stuff. Let's see. Robert says, thanks for your service. Yes, totally agree with that. Hand 4 has Jack, 5-5. Yes, I like that you're doing that, Greg. Please do that more when I jump back to this in a second. Robert says, I do find most rooms are more casual than what you say. Not out of control or anything, but a lot more things are handled by a casual warning, even things like protecting your hand. Yeah, a lot of rooms are pretty casual. It does become a culture, and protecting your hand is like this thing that's, I don't know. I don't want to go on that tangent right now. But yeah, it's really annoying to me when someone doesn't protect their hand and they get all their money back from the pot. It's absolutely teaching the wrong lesson to somebody. I've even seen stuff like that in the World Series sometimes. And I'm just like, it's not sending a good message to poker. Holding poker players accountable for their actions is really important. Joe says, well then, would you ever allow leeway for a player that's considered a George or a regular that's a high roller? So I will say this. Those players typically play... So we're talking about poker right now. Georges are different in poker. A lot of those players play in private games that are set aside in the poker room. When that's the case, there is a different vibe a lot of the time at that table, and you do let certain things go. So you don't want to necessarily assume that rules are universal for every single table when it comes to things like cursing. That being said, at your regular games, I promise you that a room is going to be so much better run if you're pretty standard across the board. It's tough to do, though. Poker dealers make money off their tips. Getting players to tip them is valuable for them. So if you have a good tipper that's cursing, and that's generally where you have more problems enforcing rules, you're going to have a tougher time getting dealers to tell them, to tone it down. It takes somebody with savvy, which is part of what we're talking about here. There's a lot of poker dealers that are not going to handle these situations with savvy. Why? Because a poker dealer is already multitasking on like 4 or 5 different things at once, paying attention to the action, bringing all the cards, not making mistakes, preventative dealing, and then this comes along, and it's like they got to handle that on top of everything else they're already doing. Imagine trying to deal a deep pot limit game, count the pot, keep track of what the pot is, and handle all this stuff. And these are the players that play these games. It's a lot. So it does take a poker dealer that's savvy and capable of communicating intelligently without offending somebody in order to sort of show up to this, which is why a very good and acceptable method, if it's the best you can do, is to get tapped out from your table and tell a supervisor about what would happen. Hey, it might be a good time right now to go monitor this table. The cursing is sort of out of hand, and I apologize. I didn't handle it. You know, I don't think there's many supervisors that are going to give you a super hard time about it, because you are going to tell them. You can tell the supervisor, I just didn't find a way in my head to bring it up so that it, like, in a non-confrontational way. But a supervisor can go to that table and definitely enforce something, because the supervisor has the full power to tell somebody to leave. And, you know, if you are in a room where you're just never going to tell somebody to leave because they have a lot of money, I think you don't run your room properly. I think that the essence of your poker room is built on the way that you run it, and the experience that people have is the thing that determines whether or not they come back for a lot of people if they have options to go to other rooms. If there's no other options, it can be easier to just do whatever the heck you want, and then when another room opens, then good luck, right? But I feel like the thing that you're saying is it's done a lot. I've spent most of my time as a supervisor, so I've seen the other side of it. And I personally prefer working somewhere, and there are places like this, where they're not going to cater to somebody just because they have a lot of money. And I've been screamed at by somebody who supposedly has $800 million to their name. Screamed at by this person like they were a little child, throwing a tantrum to get what they want, telling me that I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know how to run a room, I don't know all this stuff. You know, meanwhile, this is the same guy that in another room jumped up on a table and mooned everybody. And it took that for them to get kicked out. Like, you know, do you really want to let it get to that point? That's not good for anybody. And so I kicked the person out for being out of line in a more reasonable way when they're threatening to take somebody outside and talking about all this stuff that's getting incredibly confrontational with somebody. You know, kick them out just like they're anybody else. And if they want to play poker, they come back and play poker. But that's a supervisor thing. You know, as a dealer, alerting a supervisor to it is pretty important. But, you know, at the same time, if somebody has $800 million, okay, this is really important to understand as a dealer or a supervisor. If you have a poker room in a casino and this person also plays in the casino, what you should be doing in that case when this person is out of line, you should be telling your supervisor, carefully handling the situation, telling your supervisor when you get tapped out of the table. The supervisor should then be going to tell the host of the casino that this particular player works with, and that host who already has a rapport with that player should be the one to handle the situation. Okay, that host is going to be able to handle that most of the time. They're going to comp them a meal or something like that. They're going to offer them exorbitant, I don't know the right word, a large amount of free play and slot machines or whatever that player wants in order to get them to back off a little bit. And they're probably going to tell them, hey, there's a bit much in there. You know, could you please calm that down? Having hosts is a very, very valuable thing in poker, in casinos. And I've enjoyed working in rooms where there's crossover, where they come, because you're not going to have hosts just in poker normally. It's going to be only in a poker room that also has a casino. The casino is the thing that needs the host for the higher rollers. So, I mean, if you're in a poker room that's just a poker room, you can only make so much money off of this person anyway. Yes, they do attract some people to follow them, but they're fair weather players with large amounts of money that are trying to take shots at this person with a lot of money. I mean, yeah, you want the fish in your room, but not if it's going to just cause all of this chaos. Let's see. Riff Raff says, hey there, looks like I'm late. You are late. I was late today as well. As you can see, we've got Mixed Nuts up on the screen. You are the one that made this. Big thank you for making this. I downloaded my iOS version of it today while we were in the live stream, and I am going to challenge myself to get through Omaha 8 in a minute. I tried. I forgot about the low in one hand, and I crushed my hopes and dreams, but I want to get through it again. Why do I do this? I don't mind putting myself on the spot, trying to go sort of quickly so that you guys can get a sense of what an experienced dealer is capable of and not feel too stressed if you have some trouble with it. Because I did have someone earlier in this session bring it up in the first place and say, hey, I'm not 100% perfect at Mixed Nuts. Is that okay? And the answer is basically yes. But on a table is a bit easier to read hands. Is part of the reason why. Nonetheless, it's a fantastic training tool. Joe says, thanks for your insight, valuable information. You're welcome. Greg says, suppose the host is off the clock or otherwise indisposed, would you leave him a voicemail? As a supervisor, there's usually going to be one or another host that's there at any given time. Like, I don't know if there's a specific dynamic in working in a casino that you're picturing, but the casinos that I've dealt with hosts, there's a lot of hosts that work there, and there's usually 1, 2, or 3 that the player is familiar with that's on property at any given time. Riff Raff seems happy. Apple made me go through a lot of hoops to get it on iOS. Yeah, it's hard to get perfect in Minnesota. Yeah, for sure. If you deal to Brad, make sure he gets you in one of his vlogs. Yeah, I'm interested to see if I end up meeting him, talking with him. Like, I mean, look, I'm nowhere near on his level in terms of how big my YouTube channel is. But at the same time, we're both YouTubers, you know? And I would love to have that conversation with him and say, hey, and like I would tell him, you can put my face on this one. I don't care, you know? I'm already on YouTube, something like that. Robert says, if the guy is worth 800 million, there's a host available. You're right, exactly. That's sort of my point. I think in this context, Minnesota stands. Oh, thank you, Craig. That's really funny. In mixed nuts, yeah, I wouldn't have made that connection. Now I have to go back and read what he said. It was hard to get perfect in mixed nuts. Yeah, that totally makes sense. Thank you for that. Listen, I make mistakes all the time. It is what it is. All right, time to challenge myself again. Wait, Brad, I'm new to your stream, but I'm now a subscriber. How often do you stream? I love this format. Well, that's cool that are you saying maybe what I should say to him? I mean, I've watched some of his stuff. I like it. I've had people that have said they literally they jam out to his videos before they go play poker sessions. You know, Brad Owen has got that reach in poker now where he's such a good storyteller. People literally are like, all right, I'm going to go play a poker session today. I'm going to watch 2 Brad Owen vlogs before I actually sit down at the table just to get myself in that mindset. Like, people have been serious and told me stuff like that, and I'm like, you're awesome. You know, I love somebody who's passionate personally, but it was also pretty funny to hear. All right, here we go. Omaha 8, reading hands. I'm looking at this. A flush is going to be the nuts. I see the queen high here. All right, so here's the high, and there is no qualifying low. So we're moving on. Here we go. The nuts in this hand would be a 4-7. I see it right here. Do I see another 4-7? No. And there is going to be a low. I see an ace deuce here. Do I see another ace deuce? No. Next one. All right. So the high is going to be a 5-7, which I see here. And I don't see another one of those. And the low is going to be, is there an ace 5 anywhere? Yes. And there we go. Here we've got, so no board pair, no possible flush. So the highest possible straight is going to be a 7-10, which we see right away. I don't see any other ones. And there is a qualifying low here. So 3-4 would be the best one. I don't see that. 3-5 would be second. I don't see that. 4-5 would be third. I don't see that. So now we're looking at a ace 3, which is going to be a 6 low. Oh, no, wait. Nope, not an ace 3. Hold on. So we're trying to get below an 8, right? So anything below an 8. Here's a 7-4. So this is a low so far. So there's a 7 low. Here we go. All right, next one. We've got a pair of 3s on the board. So there's no flush, but there is a board pair. So we're looking for 9s. Don't see it. 5s. Don't see it. I do see a 5-3. Which would be 3s full of that. I see it 3-4, no. All right, so here's the high, 3s full of 5s, and then the low is going to be ace 4 if anyone's got it. No, there's an ace with an 8 there. So what do we got? 4-6. Yeah, 4-6 is going to be the low. So they would scoop it. Nice. Here we've got let's see, 3s on the board. There is a flush. First, we're going to look for full house. So I see 3s full of kings, but do I see pocket kings? No. Do I see pocket queens? No. Do I see pocket 7s? No. So this is going to be the high. Does anyone else have it? No. All right. And the low, there's no qualifying low. Here we've got pair of queens, so I'm looking for queen 7 is going to be the high. Queen 9 would have beat it, but nobody's got that. And then there's no qualifying low. Talking my game, doing what I can here. So we got a pair of 3s on the board. I don't see quads. I see 3. So I'm looking for kings. No. 9s. No. 3. Do I see a pair? 3, 9. Full house here. All right. And there's no qualifying low. Got it. Here we've got kings and 9s. All right. So this is interesting. Oh, so this is king jack. We got sort of lucky here because we see. I just have to check for pocket 9s. I don't see them, and there's no low. And then the last one, I see the possibility of hearts. So here I've got hearts, and there will be a low here. 3, 4 is the best low. I don't see 3, 4. Okay, so then we go, what would be next? I guess 3, 5 is a good low. So if you have a 3, 5 here, you're going to have a 6, 5, 3 deuce ace. And it's a live 3 with a 6 low. Right, this is one of those where I might be missing it though. Let me see, 3, 4. No. Yeah, it's the only one. So, all right. Is there any other live 3? No. There we go. So we did it. That last one took me 45 seconds. Yeah, that's pretty good, right? Here we go. Oh, just said, oops, sorry, I thought your name was Brad. Oh yeah, my name is Marc. I'm True Poker Dealer. Brad Owen is an awesome guy that, what happened? I went back to this. That does a poker vlog and plays poker. Let's see. Greg says, here we go. Are you running the iOS version here? No, this is still the web version because it's the one that I can use on a computer. Greg says, no low. King 3 is the nuts. Robert says, wow, even your verbals are almost exactly what I do, but when I miss one, it'll usually be a tied hand, or sometimes I'll miss a very bad 2 pair or a very bad low. Riffraff says, well, Marco, perfect. 25 of hearts for the high. Yep. Last one is a hard low. Riffraff, very good. Appreciate the support, guys. Been streaming for a little bit here. So what else we got today, guys? I feel like I'm pretty close to wrapping up. Appreciate everybody being here. I'm certainly open to answer some questions. We had some interesting conversation today. I should have eaten right before I did the live stream. Let's see. I'm going to remove this and yeah, if you guys have anything else you want to talk about, that's what I was going to look at. I wanted to see this, what it is. I said I was going to talk about Brad. Yep. I said I was going to talk about the extra chip. I said I was going to tell a story about the player who was taking shots, which I did. Robert says, in PLO, do you ever lose track of the pot size? Like maybe player 1 bets half pot, player 2 raises pot, player 3 calls, player 4 pots again, and how much does player 1 need to call? You're not sitting at your table, are you? Says Greg. Right now, no, I just moved in. I don't actually, my table broke. I don't have that. And, all right, let me see. So here's the answer for PLO for me. I haven't run into a situation where I've completely lost track of the pot amount in the last 3 months where I've been dealing it again. And before that, I don't think I remember doing that. But dealing pot limit is actually a little bit easier at Texas Card House because you might not think that this makes it easier, but there's a lot of split pot limit games. So I'm dealing a lot of 5-card Omaha high-low, and so I'm stacking the pot. And it's a bit of work to stack the pot, but it's not that bad. And what ends up happening is when you stack the pot, you sort of get a sense of, does this make sense? And then you can sort of remember it. But I've really been focusing a lot on remembering my steps of how much I bring in bets and how much the dead money is. And so if you say pot and I'm dealing to you, I'm almost never going to give you a number straight up. I'm very quickly going to get there though. So I'm going to say something like yesterday. I think I said something like 130 times 5 plus, I forget what the number was before that, right? So then it was, all right, 650 plus, and I sort of talked myself through it. So it's 130 times 5 plus this, 650 plus this. Why? Because I've sort of gotten comfortable doing this type of math because a lot of it is just repetitive and not that hard. Or you get used to it more so. If you need to count the pot, it's always a huge pain. Like if you have no choice, I guess go do it. The players are going to be annoyed. The supervisors are going to say that you got to practice more in order to do it. When a player, usually though in the games that I've been personally dealing, the players aren't deep enough for it to go pot, repot, something like that, and have it matter. There are a lot of times where I'll say that's an effective all-in, right? So I won't actually say, I'll just say that it's an effective all-in because I'm looking at the other player's stacks. And at that point, it doesn't matter how much it is. But Greg says at Riff Raff Games, have you ever dealt No Limit Hold'em? Riff Raff has dealt just about everything. So for me personally, I am remembering the increments, and then as the hand is going, as soon as I can tie it together into a pot amount, I'm doing that. But it's usually not that hard to take the numbers that you're using and turn it into a combined number. I'm very visual with this stuff too. So I will, when I'm pulling the bets in, I will pull the bets in. I will take a mental snapshot of the dead money, and I'll remember that mental snapshot for the hand. I'll pull the bets in. I'll do the math of number of people times the bet amount. I'll pull that in, and I'll have those as separate things in my head so that I just say it out loud, add it, so that everybody has confidence in my number as well. Let's see. Yeah, when it goes pot and repot, I feel like it's just a thing that, once you sort of get all the other stuff you have to concentrate on out of the way in these pot limit games, doing stuff like that gets a lot easier. I haven't felt particularly stressed dealing pot limit in a while. I sort of like it. It's a little bit more interesting, and the tips are usually better. This is my son FaceTiming me. Hey, I'm in the middle of a live stream right now. You want to say hi to everybody? Hello. You're talking to all of the people that are watching True Poker Dealer right now. Can I call you back later?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll do that. Bye. That was fun. He's my little mini me, he called me, so I figured I'd let him say hi. Everybody said hi to him. I'll have to tell him that. So yeah, dealing pot limit is pretty cool. What else do we have here? He said, you're not sitting at your table, are you? Sorry to hear that. Oh, he wanted to play a hand. Yeah, I can't do that right now because I don't have the table here, unfortunately. At some point, I'll get back to a point where I have a poker table ready to go. Riff Raff says, I haven't dealt PLO. I kind of dread having to do it someday. Oh, yeah, that's right. You dealt a lot of mixed games, but not specifically pot limit. Let's see. Greg says, perhaps you deal to me someday. I've only ever dealt 1-2 and 1-3 no, or Greg's only played 1-2 and 1-3 no limit. It's really funny. You earlier, Greg, said that at Mohegan you think that they do chop down to the $1 in the 2-5 game. Well, how would you know, right? Let me see. You probably get used to it because it repeats itself a lot, right? It does. You get a lot of the same numbers. The first time you sit down in a pot limit game, you're sort of doing math on things that later it's all memorized, which is a nice thing. Wait, there was a question about straddling and restraddling, I think, and I didn't see that. Oh, Joel says, hello, Marc. You made double straddle there. Do you like the idea of it or not really? I'm a fan of letting higher stakes games do whatever they really want to do. They're already high stakes games, so if they like having that available, yeah. But generally speaking, straddles, restraddling, and all that stuff, it kills the game quicker because it gets people all in quicker, which means that you have fewer players. The bad players lose their money quicker. From a poker room standpoint, from a poker dealer standpoint, it's never really that good of a thing. That being said, if you do have endless business and people just keep coming through and pumping money into these games, the bigger the pots, sometimes the bigger the tips. So I am sometimes a big fan of that, but it's all circumstantial. If I'm running a room, I'm probably not going to allow it except for the private games. Let's see. I like that you guys said hi to my son. I also like that I answered and put him on blast, but he's fine with stuff like that in general. He likes attention in my experience. My older one hates attention, but my younger one likes it. Riff Raff says, as soon as the hand reaches max rate or kill in an Omaha game, the pot size gets removed from memory immediately. That's usually a limit thing. I assume you're talking about limit. And yeah, I mean, I get it. I found myself, because I deal so much pot limit at Texas Card House, it's probably like 4 tables a day. You know, most of it's no limit still, but because there's a lot of pot limit, I find myself actually keeping track of the pot in 2-5 no limit a lot of the time, and it's effortless at this point. Because when you have to do it every single hand, it just sort of becomes trained habit, and that's really valuable to do as a poker player. Something that I talked about with Michael Lockey, Poker Pro, and he came on my channel and we did a, becoming a poker dealer to become a better poker player live stream where I interviewed him about that, and he talked about how he ranges people and keeps track of the pot all the time, and he taught himself to do that as a dealer, not as a player, which I think makes a lot of sense, and I sort of enjoy that I'm doing that more than I used to, because I used to only deal pot limit occasionally when I would deal. Now I'm doing it every single day, and now it's just like, all right, let's do it. Greg says, I know they do at 1-2. I'm not comfortable with 2-5 yet, though I hear that 2-5 plays like a 1-2 or 1-3 for the most part. We'll see. It depends on the room. In Mohegan, I believe that's probably true. In Texas, in the match to stack games, plays like a 5-10. It's crazy. Robert says, TCH probably has had everyone at the table straddle. They're crazy. Yeah, they are. And they do straddle and restraddle and restraddle. I mean, I dealt the live stream. The 2-5 live stream had more restraddling than the 10-25-50. It was only a couple of times that I saw a restraddle for 100 in that game. But in Austin, I've seen it go up to 3 or 4 or 6 or something like that, 100, And I also don't watch every single one, so I don't know for sure what's done. Greg says, Mohegan Sun, Connecticut allows straddle from under the gun in no other position. Texas Card House also allows straddles from under the gun in no other position. A lot of places do allow button straddling. D1 Key says, hey Mark, hey, what's going on? I'm dealing a poker tournament for my older brother's bachelor party on Saturday. Super excited. Great, that's really good to hear. I'm curious to hear how it goes and what your experience is like as the dealer. You can tell us all the details too, actually. I was going to say don't tell us the bachelor party details, but why not? We like stuff. This is a casino crowd, right? Robert says you have to be an awfully good 2-5 player to make more than the dealer. You do. That's absolutely true. And one of the things that Michael Lockey talks about is if you're going to grind 2-5 all day, why not just deal poker, right? I agree with him. Although he really says mix it up, right? Deal sometimes, play sometimes. Although he's an advocate of playing bigger. Robert says, I'm not sure it's even possible. It is possible to have an hourly higher as a player than as a dealer. It is at 2-5. Joel says, do you like the high denomination plaques or would you prefer chips? I don't know if it's started yet, but I'm pretty sure that the plaques are going to be taken out of play and oversized chips that are smaller than the plaques but bigger, slightly bigger than regular chips, are going to be brought in to Texas Card House pretty soon, because it's hard to run even bigger games than the 10-25-50 with the plaques because they just take up a lot of space. Something nice about chips is they don't take up as much space. So I like plaques, but I feel like 1,000 is just having seen them in play. I feel like 1,000 is probably too low of a denomination to use plaques, even though they're awesome in a sense. a player was telling a story at the table the other day. This was a really, really fun moment. They said they played a lot of disc golf, and they accidentally forgot to cash out one of their 1K plaques at Texas Card House, and they were out of town, and they had it with them, and they're like, what's something creative I could do with this 1K plaque while I'm out of town with it? Obviously, they're going to go cash it in. Well, they play a lot of disc golf, and they decided to use it as their little small disc that they put to mark their location for when they go and putt or take their shots. If you are familiar with disc golf, competitive disc golf, this guy seemed pretty competitive. He was talking about, putting from 100 yards and closer, which is really hard to do. If you ever watch disc golf on YouTube, you can see some of these guys do this stuff, and he sounded like he really knew what he was talking about. Anyway, so he said that he used his 1K plaque as his spotting disc, which I think he calls it his like small disc, and you have to stay behind it with your foot when you go to throw, which is one of the coolest uses I've heard of a plaque. And then I started talking about how I'm pretty sure I could throw one of those. I would challenge a professional disc golfer to see if I could throw a 1K plaque further than they could throw a disc. I'd be curious to see. I might be able to do it. Got a pretty good arm, so I used to love throwing rocks at the lake that I worked at years ago. Who knows though, I'm old now, so I might not be able to do it. I might embarrass myself, but I'm always down for a good time. Let's see. Riff Raff Game says button straddling seems overpowered. I have so many mixed feelings about this. I haven't heard the poker playing strategy side when it comes to straddling. I hear that some pros think that putting in a blind raise, which is what a straddle is, and getting last action against fish increases the size of the pot, but you're putting up two big blinds with a hand that you don't know what it is. So your post-flop play has to be so superior in order to make that two big blinds back per orbit. Two big blinds is tough to make up per orbit, right? So doing it under the gun or on the button, in both cases, it's like, sure, you have the positional advantage, but position doesn't have to be as much of an advantage as people think. Like, people have gone crazy over positional advantage. When I've talked to pros that say position, yes, there is an advantage component to it, but if you're just a better player than somebody else, it doesn't matter as much as you think. So there's all these different factors in there. That being said, you can argue that straddling, if you're able to beat the game, is always an advantage and you always want to do it. You can make an argument that you're throwing two big blinds out there without knowing what your cards are, and therefore it makes it harder to play. I'm totally down for both sides of the argument. I think that, yeah, on the button, it's a little bit better than out of position, but I think ultimately it's probably whatever is sort of what I'm saying. I do understand that it's overpowered, but you got to remember that player is putting in money blind. It's just that simple. That's never an advantage in itself. So, and then also what I've noticed in markets that don't allow button straddles, if you're somewhere that doesn't allow button straddles and you first get exposed to it, you're just like, oh, this is so annoying and different. I hate it, blah, blah, blah. Players in the small and the big blinds start complaining, oh, man, I hate having to go first. I hate when you straddle your button and it's my blinds. And then when you get used to it, you're just like, yeah, it's part of the game, whatever. Literally, just like that. Like, the entire market of Florida that allows button straddles for the most part. Maybe not everybody down there, but people are just like, whatever. Some of the casinos out there allow straddling from any position. You just get used to it. If it's all, I say this all the time. When you first learn about poker, there's a tendency to think that the first thing that you learn and get used to is the right way to do it, and anything else feels like an outrage. But realistically, that's not how the world is. And that's not how the poker world is. You get used to whatever it is that you're around. You put up a fuss at first if you want to, and then you're just like, yeah, all right, it's still poker. Let's see. Robert says, plaques make you look like James Bond. That's sort of true. Greg says, Chaser's Poker Room in New Hampshire uses $100 plaques. That's fascinating. Seems like it takes up a lot of space at the table. It just seems like too much. D1 Key says, I dealt a tournament for home, and his friends last year, and yeah, they're an interesting crowd, especially when alcohol gets involved. Yes, I can imagine that that's pretty wild. Video Gamer Consortium says amazing to watch. Riff Raff says, yeah, but you got the button. I mean, you got the button, it's true, but I mean, you're putting in blind $10 or in a 2-5 game, right? Okay, it's like it's a blind bet that you know, if you have a 3-7, every single 3-7, you get in that spot. Now you're playing it. Are you good enough to make money calling $30 in position with 3-7 if it's a $40 raise? Because I mean, what's the standard raise? Like, are you really that good where you're going to be able to do that? I feel like there's also just an absolute burn on that extra money. I think it's a reasonable argument that it's a disadvantage as well. But I don't know enough about poker from a playing standpoint. I know about it from a working standpoint. From a playing standpoint, I don't know enough about it to know if it's truly a good idea. I've also heard straddling when a player's in the big blind that's a weak player is a very good thing. When a player's in the small blind that's a weak player is a very good thing, because they're more likely to call and just get sucked in for more and more amounts of money. I mean, I'm sure there's an exploit there. Let's see. You can button straddle in Mississippi. In practice, it doesn't really seem overpowered. Almost exactly what Marc said. It's an advantage, but it's expensive to buy, right? Riff Raff says, I've never seen a button straddle, so when someone does it under the gun, has to match the straddle amount. No. When there's a button straddle, the player in the button when there's a button straddle, typically, it's not 100% like this. There's this thing called like ultimate last action, which I think is ridiculous. But typically, when the button straddles, the small blind acts first. It's the player to the left of the straddle that acts first. So if you allow a straddle from any position, which some rooms do, then whoever's to the left of whoever straddled acts first. And if multiple players try to straddle in the same hand, then whoever has best position, meaning the button, gets priority if they want to straddle and the other players can't. Robert says, yeah, small blind is first caller, right. Rival in, I don't know how to say it. I don't live in Texas, but I was thinking about visiting. Can I come play at Texas Card House, or it is a members only club with fees? Well, you can absolutely come play. If you just want to play for one day, they're going to charge you $10 to get in the door. I mean, it's not that much. And then you pay per hour to play there instead of paying a rake, which comes out to be a little bit cheaper unless you don't end up using your time up. Riff Raff says, interesting. Greg says, fun fact, a straddle from any position is called a Mississippi straddle. True. Possibly because it came from Mississippi. Possibly. I assume it came from Mississippi, yes. Although, did Texas Hold'em actually come from Texas? I don't know. Joel says, I assume so. Joel says, when two players are all in pre-flop with no more action, does it look amateur to tap the table between flop, turn, river? It's not required, correct? I would say do it. The reason I would say do it is because I have seen a dealer not realize that someone else was still in the hand or something like that. And so when you bring the flop, if you tap the table before you bring the turn, that still gives a player an opportunity to stop you. If they both have chips, I would say just always do it. It's fine. KA says, hey man, I gotta say that your videos help me out a lot when it comes to deal poker. Almost learned everything from them. Have a great day. Appreciate that. There's always people that keep saying this to me. I really wish that over the years I had captured all of these comments, because it would be a really cool thing to put up on my wall. Like, really, you guys are great. Appreciate all of you. Appreciate these comments. And, you know, if you don't tell me, I don't have any way to know most of the time, right? So thank you. Robert says, I believe the Mississippi straddle comes not only from Mississippi, but specifically from Tunica. It was in Tunica before it was in Biloxi. Cool. That's a fun fact. Well, unless there's any more comments that come in the next couple minutes, I am going to say thank you all for today, and I'm going to jump off, and we'll wrap up the live stream. And this has been a really cool cool time. Don't forget, if you're just jumping in, meetup game with Brad Owen and Andrew Neem tomorrow at Texas Card House, Dallas at 6 p.m. Probably show up early. You know, there's only 20 tables in the room, and so they have a tendency to fill up. They might have a couple extra tables on the side that they have set up. I'm not sure if they're going to do that, but you know, we'll see. And appreciate you guys. Like I said, every week this is my time to spend some time with you, and I like that very much. Let me think for a second. Next week I may not be live streaming because it might be a travel day for me. I go to Florida to see my kids once a month, but I will be back after that. And yes, Video Gamer Consortium, I will be sending you that. I'm gonna take about 10 minutes. Yeah, got a meeting. Let me see. Thanks, dude. Have a great night. Greetings from Germany. Appreciate that very much. You have a great night as well, and everybody have a great afternoon if you're in the U.S., great evening if you're in Europe, and great wherever you are if you are wherever you are. Appreciate you guys. Have a good rest of the night.